The Age of Jackson is when Andrew Jackson becomes president. The Age of Jackson introduces the Age of Common Man, which is a rise in common people. Most of Jackson's supporters were common people, who were laborers, farmers, and frontiersmen. Jackson changed the way to vote, so you don't have to own property to vote anymore. Jackson changed the way to choose a president, which is nominating conventions. New campaign methods emerge, like dinners, rallies, and public meetings. The Second Great Awakening was a revival of strong religious feelings. Methodists, Baptists, and other protesting groups had religious services. The Second Great Awakening centered on reforming and repairing moral injustices.
The reason for the Indian Removal Act was that President Jackson believed that Native American tribes might support foreign invaders. President Jackson thought that if the Native Americans paired with foreign invaders, they would become a danger to the nation. So Andrew Jackson decided to move the Native Americans from the east to some land reserved for them in the west. The Worcester versus Georgia case was a result because of the Indian Removal Act. Many state legislators feared that white missionaries were encouraging Indians to resist removal to the west. So Georgia had put a law stating that no white man should live near any Native American. So as a result, a white man named Samuel Worcester got 4 years of prison for living near a Cherokee Indian, and the case went to the Supreme Court. Later on, troops forcibly escorted 16,000 Cherokees west after President Jackson gave the Cherokee tribe time to move to the reserved land, which some did not. So many of the Native Americans died because of starvation, cruel weather, and diseases.
Before the war, John C. Calhoun was against tariffs. He published The Expedition and Protest, which was an essay saying the tariffs were unconstitutional. Calhoun wanted each state to nullify tariffs. Henry Clay proposed a compromise through a reduction in tariffs over the next 10 years. Daniel Webster was also against tariffs and was a senator. The Webster-Hayne debate surfaced Calhoun's idea of nullification.
Nullification crisis, in which the North and South clashed over the issue of whether a state had the right to nullify a federal law. According to the history textbook, the issue of states' rights increasingly divided Americans, especially Northerners and Southerners, in the decades before the Civil War. It pitted those who favored a strong national government against those who believed the states should be stronger. It was a major political issue from 1828, when the nullification crisis began, until the Civil War was fought to resolve it.
In a free enterprise system, individuals are free to produce and sell whatever they wish. They are also free to buy and use whatever they wish. Individuals in a free enterprise system enjoy the freedom of making their own economic decisions. The free enterprise system can go all the way back to Great Britain. Americans inherited the free enterprise system from them. In America, there was even less government involvement and more land and natural resource available than in Britain.
In 1769, James Watt improved the steam engine, which made steam available for many mechanical purposes. According to the history textbook, because of this reason, steam was able to drive many machines, in turn developed the construction of large factories. In Massachusetts, Francis Cabot Lowell, a successful merchant, and other investors built new factories during the War of 1812. In factories, workers could be supervised and could use machines driven by water or steam power, resulting in increased production. As the production of textiles and other goods increased, their prices fell. With lower prices, consumer demand rose for textiles. People could now afford factory-made clothes. As demand grew, more and more factories were built, employing ever larger machines and greater number of workers. These changes set in motion the chain reaction known as the Industrial Revolution. Before the Industrial Revolution, there was a time lag in almost everything that took place in the United States. It took weeks and sometimes months just to send a letter or pass information. Everything happened at a glacial pace. The transportation revolution changed all of that. Before the Industrial Revolution, there were very few roads, and even they were in bad condition. This made travel by stagecoach or wagon very difficult and dangerous. That all changed in 1817. Congress authorized the construction of the National Road, also known as the Cumberland Road. This road extended from Maryland to the Ohio River at Wheeling, Virginia. Roads made transportation by wagon much faster than it was before. Of all the advancements of the transportation revolution, the construction of railroads was the most significant. The first railroads carried goods for short distances, but the idea of a railroad sparked interest. In 1826, a group of businessmen launched the first American railway, named the Baltimore and Ohio, B&O. After the success of the B&O in Maryland, many other companies began building railroads. However, many problems emerged. Railroads were expensive and were costly built. In 1830, Robert Livingston Stevens solved this problem by designing an iron T-shaped rail. After this invention, railroads grew from 3,000 miles to 30,000 miles in only 20 years.
Influence on social movements and religious motivation for immigration. The Second Great Awakening introduced new religious groups like the Mormons. The Second Great Awakening also helped to reform movements like to end slavery, reform prisons, and ban alcoholic beverages. The Mormons moved from New York to Ohio, Missouri, and Illinois. They were driven out of these states because of their religious beliefs. They went westward to the Great Salt Lake in Utah. In 1877, over 125,000 Mormons lived in Utah.
The educational reform was caused because only wealthy children would get taught how to read and write because common children didn't get that much teaching. Horace Mann of Massachusetts fought to provide free public teaching for all children. Many Americans worried that drinking alcoholic beverages ruined people's health, disrupted family life, led to unemployment, and promoted ungodly behavior. In 1851, Maine became the first state to ban the drinking of alcohol. The women's right movement was caused because men had the rights that women didn't have. Women wanted equality of citizenship, but were denied. Reformers led conventions, for example, Seneca Falls Convention in New York in 1848, which passed the Declaration of Sentiments. The prison reform arose in the 1830s and 1840s. Prisons were dirty and unhealthy. Some prisons required the strict silence, and guards beat prisoners. Eliza Farnham was the warden of a women's prison in the 1840s. She believed the prisoners be treated fairly. She allowed prisoners to talk, opened a prison library, and established a school to teach prisoners how to read and write.
Many novels are considered America's greatest were mostly written at this time period. Some of the authors were Nathaniel Hawthorne, who wrote The Scarlet Letter and The House of Seven Gables. Herman Melville wrote Moby Dick, and Washington Irving wrote Rip Van Winkle. He also wrote The Headless Horseman. As for American art, many of the amazing art was coming from a movement that started in 1825. The movement began by an English immigrant named Thomas Cole. A famous painter during the movement was John James Audubon, who drew birds, mammals, plants, and other subjects in nature. The Star-Spangled Banner was written by Francis Scott Key. He was a prisoner on a British ship when he wrote it. He had seen the Battle of New Orleans and wrote the famous poem about the battle, which is now our national anthem.